Welcome, everybody, to What Do You Bring to the Table? I'm your host, Rajiv Satyal, and I'm honored and delighted to be sitting here with Meena, sometimes Meenakshi, but Meena Ahamed, and she has written this book called Indian Genius. We're about to dive in. Let's go.
Well, your whole thing on I am an Indian American, and well, that was so fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Really, when I saw that, I was like, God, he's got my whole book encapsulated in this.
I appreciated that. When you wrote that to me, I was really flattered, really touched.
Then I thought, yesterday I decided, I said to my husband, I said, let's Google him because he writes really well. I said, I like his use of language. I said, this guy must have gone to an Ivy League school. And then I thought, oh my gosh, he's an engineer and he writes so well. I'm really impressed now.
That's funny. Well, my brother went to the Ivy League school, so that's good.
I saw that, but you write really well.
Thank you.
I just want you to know that. So don't underplay yourself. Don't undercut yourself because, when you have an older brother who's a writer.
Well, the funny thing is he's a younger brother as a writer.
Oh, well,
yeah,
but my husband won a Pulitzer with his first book.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, and he won every prize. He won the Goldman Sachs. He won the, Council of Foreign Relations. He won every single prize with his first book. So it's very hard when you live with someone like that.
Right.
But I'm just saying that
don't short sell yourself.
Don't short sell yourself.
As you shouldn't either, because what you are achieving with your work is quite something. What is the book that your husband wrote, though?
It was about the Great Depression. It's called Lords of Finance, The Bankers Who Broke the World. And it came out in 2008.
I was going to say, that could not have been a better time.
Well, Tim Geithner and Ben Bernanke and all the people were calling him into their offices. And literally it was a big book. Let's just put it that way.
It was a big book.
It was a big book, yeah.
Yeah, because that was...
It was a New York Times bestseller. It was everything.
I think I remember the title.
It got every prize.
Okay, I'm going to go back and read it. That sounds amazing. Wow, that's great. So you're both... sorry, go ahead.
Well, he was an investment banker.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So he
has the inside track.
He then left to then write this book.
Well, good for him. We saved somebody from investment banking.
Yeah.
The evil of the world.
Well, I don't know about that.
I don't know if you'll agree with that. I don't think he would agree with that.
Yeah, well, we have a lot of friends in investment banking.
Oh, so do I. So they know how I feel about it.
But, he's now writing his second book, which will be finished soon. But
and when he publishes that,
well,
we'll go to our third depression. Is that what's going to happen?
Well, right. Just when Trump crashes the whole economy.
The whole world economy. He's on his way. It may happen.
He's on his way.
With the tariffs and some of the things he's doing,
exactly.
It looks like that's a real possibility.
Making America weak again.
Weak again. Wow. Okay. Let's go. We're going right in for the politics. I love it. Well, politics is my first love.
That's my first. Yeah. Well,
journalists. That's what you covered,
that's
right?
My first book, which really took 10 years. A matter
650 pages.
Yeah. I don't know. That you should, if you would enjoy the book just judging from your interests.
Okay.
Because it really is about people. Mm-hmm. Because policy is made by people. It's sort of like, why did Indira Gandhi hate being in the room with Nixon? Why could they not stand each other? And how did that impact policy? And how did U.S.-India relations get torpedoed so many times? So there's a lot of that in the book. And there were some odd things I found, like in the Princeton archives, for example, where I discovered Truman hated Nehru because he thought he was a communist. He used to call him a commie. And I discovered he had a private conversation with a chief justice who was a very close friend of his. And he told him, he said, when you go to India, I want you to meet that man Nehru and come back and tell me if he's a commie. And so Douglas goes off to India and he sits down with Nehru and he finds him a really erudite man because, Nehru's written so many books. He's a historian. He hangs out with people like Bertrand Russell. He's a real intellectual and he enjoys his company and they come back and Nehru's at that point concerned about developing India's constitution. And his mind is caught up with constitutional issues. So he comes back and he tells the Nixon. President, well, sir, I had, spent many evenings with Nehru, and I can tell you that he's no more a communist than you or I. And Truman explodes. And this is all written down. And Truman explodes and he says, he was sitting in that chair where you're sitting in right now. And I can tell you, I can smell a commie a mile away. And he was a commie if I ever saw one. And Douglas says, he says they were like chalk and cheese. And he said, when you have someone like Truman, who was a simple person from the Midwest, he said it was like blowing air into the wind, and he said it was just, he was never going to understand a man like Nehru. And so they were just never going to have a rapport. And so that's why when Nehru, and I found this, and he had written this down, this whole conversation he'd had with Truman, which really reveals how Truman thinks about India.
Sure.
And he writes this down in his memoirs, and most of his memoirs are about legal cases.
Truman wrote this down?
No, I'm just saying the Chief Justice.
Who had briefed Truman.
Yeah. So he was a friend of Truman's, and he had written down all this as part of his memoirs, and most of his memoirs are about legal cases in the Supreme Court. But I found this, I came across it in the Princeton archives.
Oh my God.
And so, this revealed to me so much about why Nehru's trip to the U.S. was a disaster, why he and Truman couldn't see eye to eye, and why things went south. So, but that book took 10 years. But there's a lot of these sorts of things in there which are really revealing and interesting. And tell you why the first 50 years of India's independence, why the relationship was so prickly and so difficult.
Tell me why. I mean, sum it up. I'm sure there's a lot. It's 650 pages, but my dad followed this very, very closely.
Well,
but I
in
did
a
not.
nutshell, India's rising and becoming an independent nation just when the Cold War is descending across Europe and the world. So so America sees the whole world as black and white, that you're either with us or against us.
Sure, that didn't change, I don't
and
think.
they wanted you to choose a side.
Sure.
And so
India was non-aligned.
And India, Nehru said, we've just thrown off the yoke of the colonial powers. And the last thing that we want to do is take on an allegiance to another Western power and be subservient to them. He also firmly believed that there should be corridors of neutrality in the world, so that you should be able to negotiate peace where you weren't taking sides. And he actually saw himself, and maybe it was in some people might say this was a sort of self-aggrandizing view, that it was arrogant that he thought that he would be the person to do that. But he saw himself as a statesman, and look, he had friends like Mountbatten and lots of people in the world who really respected him. But he saw himself as a sort of neutral statesman and a leader in Asia. And which, by the way, the Chinese really resented at the time, because at the time they were not a big power.
Sure.
And he presented himself as such. But Truman and the people that surround, and all the people who had come right after independence, they just thought this was an immoral. John Foster Dulles thought this was an immoral stance.
Like to
be non-aligned.
Sure.
They thought non-alignment was immoral.
Like have some guts and pick a side is the American way of thinking about it.
Yes, they just thought neutrality was immoral at the time.
Sure.
Because for them, Russia was such a demon. Now these are all and the foreign policy establishment, the U.S., was pretty much aligned on the fact that Russia was evil, and the foreign policy establishment in India was the one thing that they were all agreed on, was that they should be non-aligned and not in hock to a Western power. And that they have remained, by the way, throughout.
Yeah, that's been a hard thing to maintain.
But they have remained non-aligned. Today Jaishankar talks about strategic independence.
Who talks about it?
Jaishankar, the minister.
Well, just
the
for
BJP
our viewers.
Yes, sorry, the BJP,
yeah.
the BJP foreign minister of India today. So he said India should have the opportunity to make alliances with different people based on different countries based on their interests. Everyone everyone has strategic interests in the world. Now, it's probably going to serve them very well today in Trump's world, given what Trump is doing with tariffs and and Trump has not been particularly good to his allies. So now we're actually really not talking about what you wanted to talk about.
It's fine. No, the questions are always a guide. If we can just get into a conversation, it's always better.
So yeah, just let me know if you prefer to talk about
I
something
appreciate
else.
That. Same.
But today is going to be the day when, in the next few minutes, probably on the White House lawn right now, Trump is unveiling what he calls Liberation Day, which is the retaliatory tariff regime. India, of course, imposes high tariffs on goods that are coming in from overseas. And Trump did this unusual thing where he mentioned it in his first State of the Union speech, as well as in the press conference that he and Modi had. I mean, everyone had come to kiss the ring. You had Macron show up, you had Starmer, you had, come from the UK, you've had, the Japanese come. Everyone has made a beeline for Washington, D.C. because they've been so concerned about Trump's volatility and what he was going to do. So, and Modi was, I think, number 4 as the fourth visitor.
It was kind of abrupt. I don't think I realized he was coming, and next thing you know, he was here.
Well, I think everyone lined up.
Yeah.
And now he didn't get the sort of state visit type of thing in the way that Netanyahu did or, Macron did. But, he had a press conference. But even in that press conference, Trump made it clear that he thought India's tariffs were unfair, and what he was expecting from India was that India should buy oil and gas from the U.S. He already made it clear as to what he wanted. So I think there are a lot of Indians who might think that, Modi and Trump have this bromance
buddy, yes.
And they're buddies. But I think they're sort of deluding themselves because Trump doesn't actually care. He's transactional, and he's made it very clear it's America first. Look, he even embarrassed Modi by sending back those deportees in shackles. He sent back two military plane loads in shackles, and the opposition, played that up. Now it sort of died out with the next news cycle, but that was an embarrassment for Modi.
Sure.
And do you do that to your friends? I mean, no.
Well, Trump does.
Well, Trump does, but I'm just saying that there are a lot of Indian Americans in this country who are very pro-Trump.
A lot of them.
And who, although by and large 65%, Carnegie has done an amazing study of the attitudes of Indian Americans. And according to that study, you still have a 65%, I believe. I'd have to look it up.
It's fallen from 78, 79%, but it's still 2/3. It's still
65%
still
2/3 still vote Democratic. But there's been a shift amongst young males.
Very true.
10% of them have shifted over to the Republican side. Now, I don't know whether they're going to do a further survey to find out why. That's the interesting thing. And some of them, you can have an informal survey amongst your friends.
Sure.
I've certainly done a lot of informal
anecdotal type of evidence.
Yeah, this is not based in any kind of science, so don't take it as any scientific. But people say part of it is taxes, because Indians are doing very well, and they were hoping for lower taxes.
But we've always done well. So I don't think that's not what's changed. I think what's changed is resentment. So if you look at like the in-group or the power groups, giving up some of that, I'm not saying I subscribe to this, but what I've heard, like to our point about anecdotal, I think that you've seen Hindu, Muslim, male, female, trans, cis, all of these things. So the people who feel they're in the majority that always had the power are now starting to feel like, oh, well, the Democrats stand for Muslims, they stand for women, they stand for queers, they stand for, they feel this group of people, the Indian males, and not just Indian males, but young males in general feel like, oh, the Democrats don't talk to us.
Well, I think the males have gone with the trend in America in general. I actually feel like they're just part of the trend of all American men.
Well, that's true too. Sure, whether it's young or old or whatever else. Like the gender gap is quite shocking. I mean, more of the females have gone in the Democratic side and more of the males have gone on the Republican side.
Well, what the interesting statistic really I found, and I've just come back from a 7-city book tour in India with my book, Indian Genius, and Thank you.
We didn't even do an intro yet, so we got to get the intro in at some point. We just jumped in, but we'll do the intro at the end.
But
Seven-city tour in India.
yes, but Martin Wolf did a study. Martin Wolf is with the Financial Times as a columnist and very famous economist. And they did a survey of people who were for or against Trump. And, most countries from Greece, South Korea, and China, and, a lot of European countries, they varied between 40 to, let's say, 60% having unfavorable attitudes towards Trump.
Okay.
India was an outlier.
Much higher approval rating, I feel like.
80% approval rating for Trump. 80%. Now, India was it was the only country. So I was actually quite astounded by that, because it's not that Trump has done anything great for India,
No.
right? So I actually, when I was on my 7-city book tour, I brought this up with people, and I said, I would love to know. I ask the audience sometimes, what do you think? Like, why do you think that he has such a huge popularity in this country? And I had people come up to me afterwards, during the book signing and things like that. And some people would say, if you really want to know, it's partly because he's anti-Muslim.
Of course.
Which I thought was fascinating.
Of course. I think it's just that simple.
Yeah.
I think that's the sad reality of why a lot of Hindus have supported Trump, is because that's why they support Netanyahu. It's the same thing. They hate Muslims. I mean, I don't think it's, I remember like 20 years ago, talking to this comedian, J. Scott Holman. He's from Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Southern boy, but quite liberal, though, progressive. And his act was hilarious. And he didn't talk about politics. But I remember asking him, and this is when I was just learning more and more about politics, probably 25 years ago. And I said, I've been interested in why the South, American South, went from, Republican or Democrat to Republican, and this switch that happened. And he goes, there's no research project here. He goes, when LBJ, did his thing with ending segregation, that was it.
The Civil Rights Act of 1965.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing more complicated than this. I'll save you all the research. There's no research to do. That's it. So, yeah, I think that is probably a lot of it. So to the point I'm making about majority group and minority group, I think a lot of males feel like, oh, we've been in power for so long, and the Democrats want to, go for more equity instead of equality, and they want to, balance things out for females. So males don't love that. They're very, very resentful. I have to say we, because I'm a male. I can't say they. I'm not personally resentful, but I have to own my gender. So then you look at like Hindus and Muslims, it's a similar kind of thing, because the Democratic Party has championed Muslims. So Hindus go, well, then we'll go to the Republican Party. No, that's not me. I'm too progressive to ever go that direction. But I think it's that simple. I don't think people are that complicated.
That's fascinating. Well,
You don't agree?
no, I mean, I agree.
I think it's a sad reality.
It's the feedback I was getting, so I have to accept that that's probably 80% of it.
Yeah. Whether they'll say it or not. So if the fact that they came out and said it tells you a lot, because people are so emboldened to speak that way now. People wouldn't say that before, which in some ways, it's when my wife's from Texas. So it's like, where you stand. They'll always say that. Like if you're a person of color in the South, and at least how white people feel about you, you'll know your allies, and the people who are clearly your antagonists, or your enemies or your adversaries, let's just say. You'll know where you stand. Whereas in the North, the racism was always more insidious. Now, I'll maintain that people in the South are still more racist than people in the North. I think that's true as a broad statement. But it doesn't mean that people in the North are hugely accepting either of blacks and other people of color. I just think that...
So I'll say one thing here, which is in my new book. I think in the 1930s, immigration rates in the U.S. were around 13%.
Okay.
And then they fell in 1970, around the time when Indians started coming here in 1965.
When they lifted that
When they
ban.
lifted the ban. And 1965, 1970, immigration rates had dropped to almost to 4%, 4.7%. It was really low. So
From all countries, all nations, just
all
immigration
countries, generally, immigration rates had dropped from a high of 13% to something like 4.7%. So when I came here, I remember in 1970 there were 50,000 Indians in America. That was incredibly low.
50,000, yeah. That's
50,000 was
tiny.
nothing. It was
In a nation that was
in
probably 200 million
1990, they only went up to maybe 500,000 or something. I have to look at my front page, but it's something like that. But so they weren't. So people would come over with a welcome wagon when you arrived. Anyone new who came in, they wanted to know what country you were from. They were very positive. They wanted to know about your country because there weren't that many of you.
Sure.
There weren't that
You're
many.
an ambassador.
You're an ambassador. You're a foreign student. You're exotic. They wanted to welcome you in because you were not a threat. You were just a small group of people and from a foreign
There's no critical
destination.
mass.
They were not a critical mass. Immigration rates have now gone back up to 13%. So it has now become a much larger number again. And so that is why you have a pushback. There's another big change. Until 1970, it was 75% white immigration, and now it's reversed. Now we have 13%, but 75% is non-white immigration. So think about that color shift. Those immigrants blended into the population, and although there was discrimination against the Italian Americans, Jewish Americans, Irish Americans, eventually after a couple of generations and they got their economic feet, they blended into the population. But when you have a color distinction where they don't look like you, where people are from Africa and Asia and the Philippines and India, and they don't blend in quite the same way, even if they do well economically. And sometimes they don't because of the educational disparities or the language disparities. And then that sticks out much more as someone who is an other. So the blending doesn't take place in quite the same way. So I think that there has been the immigration shift that's taken place has not been the same as it used to be in America.
I was stunned by the statistic in your book that Indian Americans, the majority of us are born in India, not born in the United States. I was stunned by that.
60%, because
Because it's so recent.
Because most of the Indians that have come in after 2000.
Yeah, like late 90s, 2000,
We are now almost 5 million, but the big jump has taken place after 2000. Until 2000, it was still a relatively small number of 1.8 million or something like that. I'll tell you how this book came about. Okay. My last book, which is called A Matter of Trust, U.S.-India Relations from Truman to Trump. It took me 10 years to write because I went to every presidential library, looked through memoirs,
all
letters.
13 of them.
I did a lot of original interviews. So that was a real labor of love because it's a 70-year history of the U.S.-India relationship.
I will need to read the whole thing.
And so,
I will check that
but
out.
I think anyone who has either been born in India and brought up, there's a great New York Times review. You can take a look at that. So
of the book.
Yeah. It was also a finalist for the Council of Foreign Relations prize. But so if you take when I was doing that book, when I was working on the nuclear deal, which really is when the relationship pivots and becomes a much more positive relationship. That is when we leave behind the years of distrust, suspicion, prickliness, and the relationship starts to build into a positive relationship in what you recognize as today, where we aren't exactly allies, just under that, but we are definitely very good friends.
Which year is this?
This was under George Bush, too.
Okay.
So he is really, even though he had all these failures with the Iraq War and 9/11 and everything else, his one...
And English.
one foreign policy achievement
Right.
was his recognizing, one, that China was going to be a big threat to the U.S., and he decided that India needed to be built up and was a very viable partner with the U.S. And he actually came out and said, what does India want? Why do we have such a bad relationship with it? And what India said was that we have been a responsible nuclear power, and we want to be recognized as such, and we want to be admitted to the club. And so he said, let's make it happen. And that is when all that happened, and we got that exception through Congress for the nuclear deal, for the civil nuclear deal. Mm-hmm. He's the one who made it happen, he and Manmohan Singh. So that is when the relationship changed and began to get much better. And it reads a bit like a thriller, only because there were so many hiccups, and there were times when people would walk out of meetings and scream at each other, and the president and prime minister literally had to come and rescue it from nothing and pull it out of the tank and like push it back.
Sure.
But really it took that effort to do. But in the end, it prevailed. They prevailed, and you know, they got it done. But that is when the relationship changed, and when I began to realize that the Indian community had found their political voice. And the idea for this book came about, this new book, Indian Genius. The Indian ambassador in Washington told me when I interviewed him, he said, we needed to get this deal through Congress. It was looking difficult. So I called all the wealthy Indians in America, Indian Americans, and I said, we need your help. Condi Rice also told them that she needed their help. And they said, well, what can we do? Because they were very interested in having good relationships between India and the U.S. Mm-hmm. And they said, we want you to write to your congressman, go to your congressmen, your senators, and tell them they have got to get this deal through Congress and do whatever it takes. And I'm not going to put words in your mouth or tell you what to do, but you know what you need to do.
Okay.
So these people fanned out, all these wealthy people. They literally fanned out, and they had fundraisers and gave money, and they did, you know, they called these people and they went out with them.
They whipped up votes.
They whipped up votes. They said, we will deliver votes. They gave them money. They donated to their campaigns. And guess what?
It got through.
They got through. And that is kind of when they began to realize they had a powerful voice. Mm-hmm. So when it took me another year and a half to finish the book, because the book goes through the first Trump presidency,
Trump. Mm-hmm.
But when it finished, I began to realize that it wasn't just that community. Indians were now running things. You know, everywhere you looked in Silicon Valley, there was Satya Nadella, there was Shantanu Narayan, there had been Indira Nooyi, there in so many Indians everywhere, that this was a big story. Mm-hmm. Even the spelling bee.
Oh my gosh, especially the spelling bee. It's dominant. It's crazy. I mean, the joke that I have done, I think, you know, is that because especially South Indians have such long last names, there's so many letters in these names that they're just good at spelling, because you'd have to know so many letters in these combinations. But the reality is the studying, it shows the work ethic. I mean, to know that number of words, such a large number of words in your vocabulary is, I mean, these words that these kids are spelling, I don't even know what these words are. And I'm fairly erudite.
Right. And actually, my a publisher here said to me, I had two agents and a publisher that were after me to do a book on the spelling bee. Okay. They wanted me to do the Indian version of the Tiger Mom.
Yeah,
and I said to them, you know, I thought a lot about it. I did a lot of research. I spent 2 months getting a lot of research on the spelling bee, looking at all the kids, following it up, making charts, tables, looking at all the videos and everything. And then I talked to a couple of people whose kids were in that sort of thing. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to do it. And the reason I'm not going to do it is 2 reasons. One, the story of Indian American achievement is so much bigger than the spelling bee, and it needs to be told. Mm-hmm. The second is, I know what's going to happen because I have to embed myself with these Indians. I'm going to go to their homes. They're going to feed me roti and dal. And, they're going to be sweet. And I'm going to be observing how they behave with their kids. And then I'm going to write about them. And they're going to hate me because not all of it is going to be flattering.
Sure.
And so if they wanted me to write the Tiger Mom type of book, and I said, I can't do that. I said, I just cannot do that. I'm not going to betray the confidence of people who take me in and are kind and nice to me. That's just not who I am. And I said, I don't want to do that book. Let someone else do that book. But that's not who I am. So I said no. I turned them down, and I said the book is the story
There's
is
a
much.
broader story here.
There's a bigger story here, an important story that needs to be told, and so. This is the story. And so that is how then this book began.
What would be the parts that are not so flattering that you would say about Indian homes?
Well, no, I mean, it's just that, it's actually, if you watch Spellbound and if you watch some of those documentaries, you can see it. I don't have to, I'm not the one who's
It's
saying.
along the lines of the Tiger Mom. Like
It's
that sort of thing,
some of the
right?
parents who push their kids and, make them study reams and reams of, I mean, I particularly remember this story about this one child whose father had generated through his computer, 200,000 words, and everyone in the family was helping him learn them. And then, what he stumbles on, Darjeeling.
That's hilarious and ironic.
And you think about it. Think about when I was looking at the parent's face, in the video.
When he blew the word.
Every time an Indian family, you open up the kitchen cabinet, they've got to see that word a million times because everyone has tea in their cabinet.
I think most white
right?
people could spell Darjeeling.
Well,
it's not even like a complicated
it's
word
not
to
even
spell.
a spelling. It's just that they've seen the word in their cabinet.
Sure.
And here, this poor child was under so much pressure.
Well, I would think that it's almost like that tale where, two people are chopping trees and one person chops for 10 hours and chops a certain number of trees and the person who chops for 7 hours chops more and they can't believe it. And it's like because they took the time to sharpen the saw, right?
Yeah.
It's working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
And if you just learn maybe not 200,000 words, maybe learn 100,000, but instill confidence and like the ability to understand how to spell and all the American pieces of innovation that why these American kids have so much confidence. They may not have the ability, but they have the confidence is all you hear about. Giving kids the skills that they're going to need to be successful in the workplace, because that's very different from succeeding in school. It's very different. You can get straight A's, but most straight A students don't make the kind of money that straight B students make.
Yeah. Well, so in my book, I have a theory about what does it take to be a genius?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when I talk about Indian genius in this book, it's not really, about each person necessarily being an Einstein or a genius.
Sure. Being like a mathematical or musical
It's about the
genius.
genius of the Indian people. Well, the way you say, oh, it's the genius of the American people or, American
Sure.
exceptionalism or whatever
Sure.
it is. This is about the genius of the Indian people.
Indians in America or Indians from India?
Indians in America.
Okay. Like there's something
But-
special about us.
Well, I mean, but it comes from the culture.
Sure. It's imported.
Yeah.
But then it's sort of grown in
It's-
this petri dish or
right. It's a combination. It's that alchemy between
alchemy.
but it's American opportunity married with the Indian skill sets.
Is that the only combination like that works? Because you make the point that Indians, not that salary and wealth is the only measure of success, but it is. And so if you look at it, does it work with other Asian countries like Filipino or Chinese? Or
Yeah,
what is special about
they
India?
have, but what is remarkable is how many Indians have gone right to the top in
Right.
one generation. If you look at Satya and Shantanu and all these people, they were all born and brought up in India.
Sure,
They were
right.
studied in India, and yet they're now running Fortune 500 companies. They're the CEOs or Indra Nooyi, or they are. They're at the top of their game, but they weren't necessarily.
They were
raised.
born and formed in India.
Yeah. But what I was to go back to the point about Indian genius. Malcolm Gladwell has this theory about if you spend 10,000 hours, anyone can become a great violinist or
Sure.
a perfect, at something. And, so this theory about the father who's trying to get his kids to learn 200,000 words or whatever, over and over again, it sort of caters to that theory in a sense. But Angela Duckworth, who's another sociologist who is an education sociologist, she says, but but you have to actually want to do it. You have to have motivation. If you're not self-motivated, then you don't get to that level of genius. You can be good at something. If you do 10,000 hours, you can learn to play beautifully, but you're not going to become, you're not going to be...
You're not going to be Liberace if you play the piano, but you don't love it.
But if you don't have a passion for something, you have to have some passion for it. And most of the people who have won have actually displayed some innate interest in words on their own.
For the spelling bee, for example, specifically.
Right.
They love the language.
There's something about their words.
Passion.
So when I made a chart of the people who had won,
okay.
I sort of started looking a little bit into their lives and some things that they had said, interviews they'd given. I noticed that several of them had actually had a real interest in words. Their parents had picked up at an early stage that they had an interest in words before they started giving them all the support that they gave them. And so the child had an innate interest in it. The other thing that I thought was interesting and by the way, it's a very small part of my book, the spelling bee, the very, very barely.
Yeah, because that's the book you didn't want to write.
Barely a couple of pages, but I wanted to relate this to something else I discovered amongst a lot of the people who are high performers who I've profiled in my book, is that most of the people who performed, most of the people in my book who I've profiled said to me that their parents weren't involved in their educational choices or, frankly, in pushing them towards any of the things that they ended up doing.
So the subjects of this book said that?
Yes.
That their parents were not the ones
that guided them. They were not
them.
Sitting over their heads with a danda, so to speak.
Yes, the sword of Damocles.
Yeah, no, they were not. They were not being pushed by their parents at all. So I thought
that's a surprise.
That was a big surprise because you know how so many Indian parents.
That's the stereotype that your beta go do your math homework.
And so many parents want their kids to be an engineer or a doctor, and they push their kids. Look, the spelling bee. Forget about going for the nationals, but as you know, in the spelling bee, the community has now got their own championships within the community.
Oh wow!
And they have chapters all over the country.
Is that a feeder to the scripts? Okay.
Yes, where they compete. And it's one of them is, of course, because I think it's a good way for kids to socialize with other Indians. Another is because it's just that their parents felt that they grew up in a competitive environment.
And it's so isolating, I'm sure.
And they want their kids to understand what a competitive environment is. But what I found so interesting about talking to these people was that their parents did not. Satya Nadella, for example, let's just take him. He said his mother told him all she wanted was for him to be happy. He didn't get into IIT. And he basically, his father was a little bit distressed with him because his father, of course, worked for the prime minister and, was a very high achieving person, and he was worried that he was going to not make anything of his life. And his mother was telling him, "Beta, be happy." He loved his mother. He adored her.
Yeah.
And, what his father actually ended up doing was giving him a birthday present of a computer one year, and he got obsessed with that computer. And that's what led him to where he was.
Wow.
But he didn't get into IIT. So,
So it wasn't, the moral of the story is
Or-
not just his raw brain power. it's
Shantanu Narayan,
the
if you
heart
read
as
my
well as the head.
book, you'll see the story of Shantanu Narayan. Another fascinating thing, his older brother was the gold medalist. He was the sort of guy who was not doing so well academically, and when he came here, his brother told him, "You're going to get deported if you don't buck up and do and get better grades." And then he got nervous and he thought he better study harder.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah, he had, so he was experimenting, and he wanted to be a journalist. He wanted to do other things, but he had a very curious mind. He had a mind that he was a smart guy, but he wanted to do other things. He was experimenting with other things. So one of the things they say is that if you have a very curious mind and you've tried different things, you end up succeeding.
Sure.
So, but you have to have the freedom to explore.
Well, that is
a bit like you. You're an engineer, and then you look at where you've ended up. So you've explored different areas
across from you. So
Yeah.
that's success. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. It is funny though, because one associates that a lot more with American. The American,
Right.
the parents just want their kids to be happy. They just want, just go out and do whatever, and freedom of choice. And I mean, I've done a lot of studying, and I'm speaking a lot about happiness, and I've written a question going like, is freedom the opposite of happiness? Sometimes you give people too much freedom. It's too much. Like they collapse under the weight of the options.
So I think there has to be a middle ground somewhere.
Sure.
And luckily, with these people have been brought up in India where they've had a fairly, they know what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But yet in America, they've been given the room to experiment. The interesting question would be, of course, would Shantanu and Satya
have been that successful in India?
In India, because
That
in
is the
India,
question.
failure is... See, in Silicon Valley, failure is considered
It's a
good.
step on the way to success.
Yes, it's exact. You put it so well. And if you haven't failed at something, it means you're not trying.
Yeah, in fact, it's a necessary step.
It's a
on the way to-
necessary
It's the
step.
only way, maybe, to
And
get to
whereas
success.
in India, failure is not an option.
Yeah,
Failure,
it's ignominious. That brings shame on the family.
Yes,
and
failure
you and
is
your
not
name.
an option. It's not considered good. So the question is, would they have succeeded in the same way? So that
Do we have any way of knowing?
no,
I mean,
you
there's no
don't
test and
because
control.
you don't. But
Right.
but the question is,
Well, look at the most successful people, their counterparts in India. Are they similar to Satya Nadella, or are they very different from him?
Nandan Nilekani, I don't know. I don't know enough about the people there. Someone was joking and saying, "Oh, now you need to write a book about the Indians." And I said, "Well, that's somebody else because there are quite a few, and how do you choose?"
But if you have the passion to do it, then you can do it more than the
Yeah.
person with the knowledge.
But I mean, look at Nandan. In my view, Nandan Nilekani is so brilliant. Well, Mukesh Ambani, frankly,
Sure.
has been a brilliant.
Sure. Is it different, like if you put those two men next to each other? Now, of course, they're different and they're different paths and all those sorts of things.
Right.
But like, if there's a way to look at the billionaires or the most successful Indian Americans or Indians who have thrived in America versus the Indians in India who have gone to the top, what is the difference? What difference are they? Are there sociological differences? Are they, Myers-Briggs? Is
Well,
that like? how
I
would
can
you
tell
break
you
it
there's
down,
a sociological similarity
Okay.
amongst Indians here,
Okay.
which I'm sure you're aware of, because most of the Indians that came in prior to 2000 for sure, or even 2010, are mostly upper caste.
Yes, that's a big thing.
That's a big thing.
Sure.
I mean, so almost everyone that came in before, I would say 1990, was upper caste.
Yes, that's true.
And because of the very strong affirmative action in India now, where the caste, there's so many reservations for caste, almost 50% in some places, that's changing. And maybe that'll get reflected in the immigrants that come in. But you still need resources here. You still need connections here. You still need people who you know here. So those were all the purview originally of people who are well connected with the upper caste people. And so you didn't have to be rich. Nobody in India was rich in the 60s. Everyone, all of us, everyone was pretty poor because it was a socialist country. But
Run by commies.
No, right.
Well, no, only.
As far as Truman was concerned, yeah.
As far as, well, in West Bengal, I guess, where you were born, was it was under communist rule for 40
that
plus
is
years.
true.
Oh.
But if you think about it, there are a lot of hidden privileges. That Malcolm Gladwell makes this point again, that it may look like you stand before kings and that you made it all on your own. And, people say, oh, look, he came from nothing and made it into something. But actually, there are a lot of hidden privileges. And for Indians, caste is a very big hidden privilege.
So when did that change? It's changing now with these quotas and things in India, but you said it or after 2000,
It'll take a
2010?
generation for us to see it. It's certainly changing in India.
But the immigrants coming here
I don't
are not
know.
all upper caste.
I would have to see. They haven't done, I don't know if there are any statistics available on the immigrants coming in and their caste. Of course, we can tell by their names.
Sure.
But if you just take a look at my book, it's pretty obvious.
Sure.
And you just have to, I've gone through so many immigrants. If you just look at the Fortune 500, if you look at McKinsey, if you look at some of the startups, it's pretty clear that 80% are upper caste people.
And so that the
And
implication...
a surprising number, I did a little table, by the way. Surprising number are South Indians or Punjabi.
Yeah, I've seen that anecdotally, that it seems like the Punjabis over-index.
Yeah.
In South, are there certain states in the South that are more like Tamil
No,
Nadu?
they're
more,
quite.
they,
No, it's spread. It's
distributed.
it's evenly distributed. They're all smart.
They're all smart. It's really, it's funny because I joke about that in my act and whatever else, but it's not a joke. Like,
it's not a joke.
Well, like Kerala has a 100% literacy rate.
Right.
That's insane. No place in the world has
But
anything like that.
It's not just being literate. It's just that.
But if you have a 100% literacy rate, then the people at the top.
In India,
brainiacs.
there's a term in India we call it Tambram. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of that. What is that again?
Tamilian Brahmin.
Yeah, Tambram. Wow, I forgot about that.
Okay, so we call, I still, mentally, I still feel like I'm more Indian than I am American. But anyway, we call him Tambrams, and it's like, oh yeah, he's a Tambram. He's just so brilliant. Oh yeah, he's a Tambram.
So is it like, is there a one-to-one, or like what's the regression analysis here of like when you're upper caste, was it by design that only upper caste people were allowed to come here, or is it because they had the means, they had the money?
No, it's the means and the money.
Just had the money.
So there's a guy called Anil Seal who was at Cambridge University, did a big study, this is way, way back, about colonial times. And what the British did was that they layered their own hierarchy over the existing caste system so that they would hire people that were Brahmins and they would hire people that were upper caste to work in their administrative services. And then they actually, surprisingly, I saw in this book that he had, there were quite a few Gujaratis and bookkeepers and accountants that came from the Gujarati community. But largely, they used the Brahmins. And then they built very few schools, even though there was a great desire in India for schools. Most of the schools and universities were built after independence. And the British limited it. If you look at who went there, it was mostly attended by Brahmins. They gave the preference to the Brahmin community.
So the Brahmins had a huge
leg up. So when India became independent, it had a 13% literacy rate.
Oh my gosh.
Think about that.
Even people who could read Hindi, not just English, but read it all.
Read it all. We were an illiterate country.
That is illiterate. Wow.
When you think about
87% of people can't read.
in America think of Indians as super bright, super educated, or everyone's in STEM. But what Nehru inherited from the British was an illiterate country and people who lived on $1 a day. So,
it was a mess, as Trump would say.
Well,
it was a mess.
Well, it was more than a mess. It was, he is the one who had the vision that the way we bring India out of poverty was we invest in science.
These IITs, I didn't know this, that it was each one was partnered with a different
Yes,
country, like
yes,
the United States
yes.
or Russia or whatever it
Yes,
is. I had
because
no idea.
he also didn't want it to just be one country. You see, he wanted to make sure that India was
Non-aligned.
divested and that we got the best expertise from
From each
globally,
nation. Sure,
from
sure.
each nation. So he partnered with with different countries, from the U.S., Russia, England, Germany, and everyone partnered to create an IIT, and then the medical institutes. Now,
See, my dad's
Nehru,
brother will always say that Russia came to the defense of India way more than the United States
They
did.
did in the
So
beginning.
That's why also India is non-aligned, and why my uncle who lives in Australia, he's like, this is why not every Indian is a huge fan of the United States, because the United States was more aligned with Pakistan than India in many ways.
So, okay, we're now.
This is a different, yeah.
This is a different
we're going back like
conversation.
3 conversations
Yeah,
ago
we're
now.
going back
but yeah.
3 conversations now. But yeah, so to
Let's continue this
stick
point.
with the
The medical-
IITs, to stick with the IITs, Nehru had this vision that this is what's going to bring India out of poverty. Now, he didn't live long enough to see it, because in his time, all the people graduating, they just weren't the jobs. The jobs weren't there for them. So they often left and went to the U.S. When you think about
Brain
it,
drain.
the biggest, the cheapest investment America ever made was in that IIT that they collaborated on.
Sure.
Because the number of engineers
What an
they
ROI.
got out of that was huge. Think
What an
about
ROI.
Silicon Valley. A third of Silicon Valley is Indians, and it has spurred so much technological innovation. So think about the payback they got from that. What has brought India out of its slump, and what made India into a global power? In the 1990s, they undertook economic reforms. That was the big thing, obviously.
This is Vajpayee and Singh and
That was Manmohan Singh and Vajpayee, the two of them. But that is how India emerged as into the global economy and became a global power eventually. But it was also the fact that India had a big technological base because of its engineers and its doctors and stuff like that. It became the call center capital.
yeah.
And it became the back office capital for Chase and for all these banks.
Well, and because, as much as we want to hate on the British, and a lot of that is warranted, English was a huge
English
advantage.
was a big advantage.
No other Asian
Everyone
country
spoke
had that.
English, yeah.
Not like
so,
that.
Well, the
Philippines a little
Philippines
bit,
had
yeah.
it to a degree.
Philippines, yeah.
But just think about the fact that, so agricultural growth is not what did it. Certainly industry is not what did it for India. But what did it for India was tech. So Nehru's investment really paid back big time.
That's a huge
He just wasn't
vision.
there it was a big vision.
see it.
He just wasn't alive
When
to
did he
see
pass
it.
away?
In the 60s.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, he really didn't see it then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
62 was the 62 war with China, and then a year after that, he had a
He passed
64,
away.
yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. See, what the United States also has attempted to do, since I went 3 conversations back, one thing I was going to say is that what we've attempted to do, because I made a video also called I'm American, and it's the only country where you're really taking across the color spectrum, white to black, when we have so many racial problems here. Well, right, but show me a country that's trying to integrate people who are as different as very white to very black, right? Very light to very dark. That doesn't exist. Canada would be the only next analog. And Canada is barely a country. It's a state. It's 30 million people. It'll be the 51st state.
Hey,
The 51st
be
state.
careful.
My wife was born there, so I could maybe say that.
Yeah.
But no, I love Canada, but it's not an analog. It's 30 million people. It's not a country. Unless you have 100 million people, you're not a country. So
Well, how many people is Australia?
it's like 20 million, 25 million.
So you're saying that Australia is not a
I would not
country?
count that as a country.
All right.
As an
Well,
important
that's in
country.
your book.
I would not count that as an important country, because you need a critical mass. You get France, Germany, India, Japan, China, America. It's like the United States. There are 4 states that matter: Florida, New York, and California, and Texas. That's it. Those are the states that
then
matter.
you could say that Bihar is a country and UP is a
Yeah,
country.
right. That's why it's so significant. The population alone puts India on the map in a way that now that it's the world's most populous country, that works against India in so many ways, because population is I mean, it drives everything. It drives a lot of the problems, but it's a huge asset. You know, in addition to being a liability, it's also an asset because you just have so many people that somebody's going to be good at something. 4 states in this country take up the vast majority of, like, that's why the United States has the resources it does.
Well, you know,
Florida, New York, Texas, and California. If you turn on the news, 80% of the
but
stories
6
are
states
those.
in India account for, 65 or 70%
Yeah,
of
it's
the
the 80-20,
population.
the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle at work here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's that. But why are Muslim actors better than Hindu actors?
Why are Muslim actors better than Hindu actors?
Yeah.
I don't know. You think that's true?
I think it's true. I think even in this country, you're seeing people of a Muslim persuasion do better. Riz Ahmed has done well. Riz Manji has done well. Hassan Minhaj, Aziz Ansari. You've seen the success in the arts of Muslims far more than, I think, in terms of the numbers. It's amazing.
Well, I don't know about that, but I will say one thing. I read a book which I would recommend to anyone who is interested in Bollywood, which is Desperately Seeking Shah Rukh. Have you heard of it?
I've heard that title. It's a great title.
It is a fantastic book, and it's a sort of sociology book. This is written by a woman who had actually gone to what I call the Jhola Brigade, the NGO people who had gone to do a whole segment about women and, impact of whatever, life on women in India. And she said, they were rolling their eyes. Nobody was talking to her because it was like, oh yeah, another person from Delhi, part of the Jhola Brigade, they come with these Jholas and asking them the same old questions over and over again about poverty and their life and nobody was interested in talking to her. And then, so during these moments, she was trying to break the ice and she started asking them about what movies they watch. And then she started asking them who their favorite actor was, universally, amongst all the women, whether it was a grandmother or an aunt or a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 80-year-old, it was Shah Rukh Khan. So she said she was onto something. So she actually ditched her original research subject and she decided to go and write a book about Shah Rukh Khan and what was it about Shah Rukh Khan that appealed to all these women.
Across such demos,
generations and across, and it didn't matter whether you were rich, whether you were poor, whether you were in a village,
Hindu,
Muslim, whether you were rich or poor, whether you were in a suburb or whether you were in a village. It was unbelievable. And then she goes through his different films, some of which I actually haven't seen, and his songs and his roles and what it was that appealed so much to women. And a lot of it had to do with respect, vulnerability, and the way basically the way he treated women. It was he was the husband that people didn't have, or he was the brother that people didn't have, or he was the boyfriend that everyone wished they had. It was just incredible.
At the Academy here in Los Angeles, they were screening Desi films. It's called Emotion and Color. And they're doing Mother India and Joe Dakbar and all these movies. So on Saturday, I went to go see DDLJ. I had not seen it on the big screen.
I still haven't seen it.
Period?
No, I haven't seen it. And Shabana Azmi once told me I must go and see it, and I must go. And
he of course, Shah Rukh Khan is in it, and Kajol and Anupam Kher and Amrish Puri. And I've seen 20 Indian movies total in my whole life. I'm not a Bollywood guy at all. I don't know much about it. But that movie, I understood it. I understood why it has run for so long. It's the longest running Indian movie, and why it's so big and respected. But you talk about the respect without giving it away. That is a key theme of that film, is the respect that his character Raj displays throughout the film. Even though he's a joker and a funny guy and all those kind of things. It's funny you latch onto that, or this author latched onto that, because that was one of the main threads of his character in that movie, and perhaps through all of his work.
That's wild. Fascinating.
Let's go through some of these questions.
Okay.
So let's start at the beginning. You were born in what they say Kolkata now, but Calcutta.
Yeah.
How long did you spend there?
Oh, the first 13 years of my life.
Okay. 13 years of your life, and then you moved where?
I actually went to boarding school in Simla. My family's from Punjab, from the north.
Same
So then
here.
I went.
I've
yeah.
been to Simla. I have spent time in Shimla.
My family was. They were refugees from Lahore. They were all from Lahore, but because they were all Hindu, we had to move after partition.
Same for my dad's family.
Yeah.
He had to walk the line of partition.
Yeah, we had some land in this side of Punjab near Chandigarh, so they weren't completely deprived, but yeah.
That's wild. So my mom's family I've been to Chandigarh, the only planned city. They always love to remind me. So I spent a lot of time in
But
Punjab.
we're basically a Delhi-based family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Where do you currently live? You split time between DC
Between
and LA.
New York, well, let's say this year, for example, I spent 20% of my time in India, 25 to 30% in New York, and the rest in LA.
That's a pretty good life.
Hectic?
That's hectic.
Hectic for being 71.
Yeah, I would say for any age, I would say cross generational, just like Shah Rukh Khan. That's great. See, that's what I'm telling you. New York, California.
Yeah.
So you just got to go to Florida and Texas, and you'll cover them
I
all.
have to be a good grandma.
You have to be a good. You have two kids, and they both have kids.
I'm a devoted nanny.
That's good. It's good to be that. So is my mom, who is also actually she was born in Jalandhar.
Oh, she's born in Jalandhar.
Grew up in Allahabad though, so she speaks like top shelf. Indeed, that's her thing. Speaking of education, you earned a master's from Johns Hopkins. I got into Johns Hopkins. I didn't go. One of my mom's great regrets in life. Do you use your education?
Well, I did. Because when I studied international relations and public health, and so I did use it to as much as you can use any liberal arts education, which is never anything specific. But I used it when I was, as a reporter, it came in handy because it gives you some tools and some knowledge, about international relations and public health. My sister, who's a doctor, always she's in Delhi. She's my cousin, actually, my first cousin. We're very close. She always jokes that I'm a frustrated doctor. So I've been on the boards of Doctors Without Borders. I've been on the board of Drugs for Neglected Diseases, all great charities. But every board, and now I'm on the board of Vellore, Christian Medical College. So every board I'm on has to do with medicine.
With medicine.
Yeah. So if I wasn't in this field, if in my next life,
this would be, you'd come back as
a doctor.
Yeah. If you were punished, if you were poor, did badly in this life, you would come back as a doctor. That's my wife would say.
I have a great admiration for particularly Indian doctors. Can I just say, I just have so much respect for Indian doctors because when she works in she worked in a government hospital. She just retired, but she worked in a government hospital all her life. And towards the end, by the way, during COVID, her hospital in Delhi was a COVID central.
Wow.
Was the COVID hospital in India. And I can't even begin to tell you the stories of no oxygen and people dying, and it was terrible. But
Sure.
The things that the circumstances that they work under, you have to really admire.
I have the utmost respect for
and
doctors.
she went to the All India Institute of Medical Science, which is like the Harvard Medical School of India.
Sure.
She could have done private practice, done anything she wanted.
But she dedicated her life to public service.
It was just the way our family.
My wife is a pharmacist, and so she knows obviously a lot about medicine. She never has to look anything up. Anytime I ask her a question about any medication,
great.
She knows it. So she's on. She'll look it up just to be sure, but she gets it right. No, I have the utmost respect for doctors. My friend Joe and I were comparing notes. In fact, his dad did this podcast, and he was one of my mentors. He became a vice president of sales, the vice president of sales at Procter & Gamble. It's a very big job. And so, Joe and I were comparing notes, and I said, in Indian households, especially mine, it was like if you were smart, you'd become a doctor. Like none of the three of us became a doctor, but like we didn't. And he goes, it's funny because the way I was raised is when you're smart, you can do anything you want. And he goes, neither one's right or wrong. I go, no, that's right. That's right. That dovetails with what you're saying about finding your passion, if you're intelligent, but putting that.
Well, can I just say in this book, Indian Genius, which I'm going to plug it again.
Eventually.
But I profile doctors, and some of them you will have heard about: Atul Gawande, Siddharth Mukherjee, Abraham Verghese, the Deepak Chopra. and Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, who is one of the most compassionate human beings I've ever met.
He did this show.
He did. He is truly amazing. So I just, when you think about how 1 out of every 15 doctors in this country is Indian American, and how many of them have worked in the rural areas of this country and in the underserved populations of this country, in inner city hospitals, and in areas, in this country, 40% of the doctors who live, who are in the impoverished areas, catering to people whose incomes are below 15,000 a year, or whose populations are, 70% non-white, 45% of those doctors are foreign trained doctors, and a large percentage of those happen to be Indian. And without them, there would be a healthcare desert.
That's what I always tell everyone. I'm like, Naveen, our 3-year-old, will become a doctor. And my wife is always like, oh, let him decide whatever. I'm like, but that's the ultimate. It is the ultimate.
So I think they do God's work, because
life.
if you really think about how can you make a difference in this world, saving a life is making a difference in this world. Bringing comfort to someone when they're ill, that is making a difference. And that is something tangible. You're actually saving a life.
I don't think there's any argument.
So,
there's no doubt.
so honestly, I have the greatest regard for them, and people like Atul, who have influenced this country's attitudes towards the end of life care, who brought down infection rates in hospitals by 60% with the checklist manifesto. My friend Deepak Chopra, for example, everyone thinks of him as this new age person, but he was an endocrinologist, but one of my friends told me, you must have Deepak Chopra in the book. And I was like, oh, why? Why do you say that? And he said, let me tell you a story. This guy was national editor of the Washington Post. He said, I was doing a drug stakeout in the hills of Virginia with this very white, sort of redneck guy. And he said, he was talking to me about his divorce and his custody and his mortgage and how stressed out he was. And then we were on our way to do this drug stakeout. And he, in the middle of these rural hills of Virginia, he pops in a Deepak Chopra tape into the car radio. And he said, I'm like thinking to myself, what is this? And he said, what are you listening to? And he said, he says, man, I have to listen to Deepak Chopra because, when I listen to him, he totally centers me and he totally fixes my mind. And once I listen to him, I can do anything. And so it was such an amazing story because he said, you got to have him on the book, because he said, it's not just that he's impacting the women in Beverly Hills.
Sure.
He's impacting little guys in rural Virginia. He reaches out to everyone. So think about the impact he's having. So anyway, I just thought it was a great story.
I think he's
because think about it. When I first came here, yoga was like a hippie thing, and today they're teaching yoga in prisons and in schools,
in daycares.
And everyone's grandmother studying yoga. Every strip mall has a yoga place. So he is responsible for making it mainstream.
I could not agree more. I think that he is probably the most recognizable Indian in America. Maybe Sanjay Gupta, but he is, famous beyond belief.
Right.
He's done the show too, so you're in good company. What do you see as your role in the Desi community?
So I actually see my role. Initially, when I started off as a journalist, I saw my role more in the Indian Desi community in India, partly because any of you who grew up in India in the 60s and 70s, you grew up without TV or you had Doordarshan. So the first time you got uncensored news in English was Pranoy Roy's NDTV World This Week, which I was on. So I then started to report on stories, and I thought I could bring them. For example, I did a story on homelessness in England, and we had a huge response. 50 million people turned in because I couldn't believe in India there was so much censorship. You couldn't believe there was homelessness in England. It was news for them.
Sure.
And so this was...
You assumed everybody
This
lived
was
in a
in
castle.
because this was in the 80s, right? Nobody had cell phones or computers.
Sure, you had no way to tap in.
Yeah, this was huge. I mean, some, villages, for example, had one TV and they used to all get together and watch. And when they saw something like this, they were like dumbstruck.
Of course.
So, a show like that, or, I happened to be in Europe when the Berlin Wall came down, when apartheid ended, and it was, transformative because there was this euphoria all over the world. I mean, especially being in Europe when all that was happening, you're seeing the whole geopolitical world change before your eyes. And there's this energy and this feeling amongst everyone that freedom is here, and that all of a sudden everyone's dreams and aspirations are a reality and it can be had. When you saw everyone racing, from East Berlin to West Berlin, climbing through those walls and shouting and screaming because they were so joyful, it was, there was like a dam bursting. And that desire for freedom was just so intense, living through that moment and being able to report on it and talk about it. And then I went to South Africa, and I was one of the few people that got to interview Mandela on the eve of his becoming president. The Economist hadn't got this interview. They came to me in London and they were like, oh, if you're going to go see Mandela, could you ask him these questions for us? And I was so fortunate. And I saw my role, because I had a good network of people. I saw it as my role to be able to bring these people to the doorstep of people in India, because otherwise, how would they have done it? They didn't have a setup like they do now, of course, with lots of money. It was a shoestring budget in those days, and they didn't have like networks everywhere. I mean, we used to work out of a satellite truck, and we were borrowing it from WTN, and it was all done in an old-fashioned way. So same thing when I managed to get on Bill Clinton's plane. So, and following him, when he was campaigning for president.
What was it like what was Nelson Mandela like, and what was Bill Clinton like? Two very different people.
Very different people. Well, Nelson Mandela, was he was very avuncular, and he was very kind. And he was sort of this wise old man. And, he'd been through a lot. He'd, of course, been in Robben Island and imprisoned.
I've been there.
And so he...
No, my wife's mom was born in Durban. So we've been to South Africa. We've done the Robben Island tour. And yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah. So, he was having to deal with quite a few tough issues because the ANC, had been armed to its teeth.
This is de Klerk's people, right?
No, the ANC,
yes,
the Congress.
Sorry, yeah, right.
And all of a sudden, Mandela is now going to become the legitimate government.
Right.
And he had this challenge in front of him because the radical elements of his party wanted him to, take revenge and have radical change. And he was very Gandhian, and he didn't want revenge. He wanted to bring a country together, and he needed to be able to defang some of those people. Land reform was a very big issue at the time because South Africans owned nothing, black South Africans. And all of a sudden, they wanted land. Everyone wanted to own something. And so how is he going to do land distribution? I had asked him some of these. Anyway, so those were things that were pressing on him. But he was so sweet because after my interview, I said to him, I had to wear a sari for the interview for NDTV, and because I'd been traveling in the townships, I'd been wearing a safari trouser suit. So I said to him, I said, President Mandela, I'm going to have to change into a sari, but there's no place here. He said, I know what we'll do. We're going to cordon off this area, and my 2 assistants are going to make sure that no one comes, and you change behind, and we will guard you. He literally,
That's awesome.
he
Wow.
like guarded.
You're the presidential detail.
Yeah, no, he was just like two guys, but
Yeah.
like they guarded me, and I literally changed out of my clothes and into my sari while he's sitting there waiting for me.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
so sweet,
That's
and
so
you know,
cool.
and then I changed into my sari, and then I said to him, I said, "Am I looking okay?" And he said, "Yeah." And
Yeah.
he said, "You look lovely. Sit down."
This is something you could do in front of Mandela and not Clinton.
Oh yeah, you're definitely right.
There's a difference.
But with Clinton there was a so Clinton had a different he was a darling.
Well,
but
that's what you
anyway.
hear. He's the most charming man alive.
Yeah, Clinton on the other hand, so Clinton we had this other issue where again through my personal network, I had managed to get on this press plane.
Yeah.
And so but NDTV, you have to pay to get on it. So NDTV could only afford 3 days or 2.5 days or whatever it was. And it's a brutal campaign because the president will leave, not the president, but the nominee. He was the Democratic nominee, and it was just before the debates. So he starts in Little Rock, Arkansas, and you have to be, as the press pool, you have to be there at 4 a.m. on the tarmac waiting. And then you have this brief moment where you can ask questions, and then you get pushed into the plane, and then he arrives, and the plane takes off at 6 a.m., and you're in Iowa, and then you're in Arkansas, and then you're in some other state, and then at 8 p.m. everyone's exhausted, and then you're dragged back, and you're back in Arkansas, and you crash. I don't know how he has the energy. We were all exhausted. So I get on this plane, and it's not an ordinary plane. So the presidential press plane or the nominee's press plane is a plane where the reporters have been traveling with him for months because, the New York Times and Reuters and AP and
they're in the mix anyway.
CNN, they've got long-term contracts. So you get on this plane and you just get a ticket to get on. It's not a normal ticket. It's just like a coupon thing. But they don't tell you that you have a seat. And you arrive into the plane, and I'm looking around, and every seat is taken. And sometimes there's a whole row that's taken up by one person. They've got their children's photographs taped to the wall.
Like an office.
It's like their office. We had no computers and cell phones. It was,
1992.
early. Right. So it's all their equipment, their sort of
Their dictaphone or their
dictaphones, tape recorders,
sure.
everything. They've spread it out in 3 seats. They've put pictures of their wives. They've got a blanket. They've got their pajamas. They've got their toothbrushes.
This is their home away from home.
This is their home away from home because they've been traveling there for
Months.
weeks with this guy, months with this guy, and everyone's got their place staked out. So I'm looking there trying to figure out where am I going to sit. No one invites you. No one's friendly because everyone's competitive.
Of course, that's like their turf.
Yeah, and they all are going to fight to try and get time with the president, right? So finally, I sit in a seat and someone ejects me. Someone says, "You're not sitting there," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm not." And I said, "There's no one sitting here," and he says, "No, that's taken by someone. Go somewhere else." And so, after the third try, an AP guy was really nice to me, and he says, "Look, I'm going to move over. You can come and sit in my extra seat." So I was like,
Shout out Associated Press.
But it was like that. So I decided, okay, I've got 2 days to get this. How do I do it? I look around and I see a bunch of really bedraggled-looking reporters. They all look terrible. Their hair looks greasy. They are wearing these trench coats, and they look like they haven't showered or laundered or done anything. And I thought, okay, that's it. Who am I dealing with? This is Clinton. So the next morning, I figured, okay, 1 day goes by, and I realize I have 1 day. So I get up in the morning, have breakfast, and I come down in a bright canary yellow Ungaro suit, and with a bright pink scarf. And I put on a lot of makeup. And I said, okay, these guys look like they barely slept, and they look dreadful. They haven't even combed their hair. I look perfect.
You're the canary in the
coal
coal
mine. And I
mine.
was much younger. I mean, I was in my 40s. So
I was going to say, this is 30 plus years ago.
I looked a lot better than I do now.
Wow.
And so I wore my high heels, and I literally went down, and no one spoke to me at breakfast. No one talked to me. They all looked at me and they're like, who is she? Like, she calls herself a journalist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, you wait. And you won't believe it. I stood there and Clinton saw me immediately and he made his way over to me and gave me my interview.
Of course, you knew the path to the man's heart.
And, in Pranoy and Radhika was saying that when they got the raw footage, they said, Meena, they said this guy like hit you on the head with his mic and stuff, literally with their boomers, I was being hit and swagged with some of the other journalists, pushing me out of the way, trying to get me out of the way so that they could get in front of me. But he was determined to come right to me. And he said, ask your questions. And I did. And I got the interview. And that's what I needed. And then I knew I could get off the next day and I could save them that half day's money.
That's right,
great.
which they loved.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
So that was my Clinton story.
What a story. That is phenomenal. So we want to respect your time and get you out of here because you've given us well over an hour and it has been amazing too.
Well, no, I'll just quickly say that my book, Indian Genius, is divided into 3 sections. It's
West Pakistan, India, and East Pakistan.
No, it's tech, medicine, and public policy. And I picked, a lot of people want to know, how I chose this. I wanted to pick the 3 areas where I thought Indians have had a major impact and where some of the Indians have been truly transformational. And so, you had to make some hard choices. I only wanted to do 5 people in each because I wanted you to get to know them. And I wanted to do justice to the people. So I wanted to limit how many people I interviewed. And so there it is. I hope you enjoy the book. The people are fascinating. They've all had great contributions to society. And that's all I can say. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you so much to Meenakshi Ahamed for joining us. This has been really lovely to sit down and talk about Indian Genius and your previous work and all the things you've been doing in the world. It's been a fascinating conversation. We had to squeeze these questions in at the end because we just sat down and started talking even before we were recording. We were just into a conversation and it was really something. And I feel like we covered a lot of this. There's always more to go. But I tell you, one question I have to ask is where do people find the book?
You can go to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and hopefully your bookstore.
Wherever books are sold.
Yeah,
okay.
Wherever books are sold.
That's fantastic. Well,
and it's available on Audible and Kindle and the hardcover as well.
Do you read it?
No, I didn't read it.
Did you want to?
No.
Okay.
I did not want to.
You wanted someone to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. You have a good voice, though.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. It would have been fun to have you read it to us. Yeah, that would have been cool.
Well, I asked them to find someone who knew how to pronounce Indian names.
That is clutch. That's really, really important because you get these people who they start talking and then you're going, okay, you have no idea how to pronounce that word. So you need someone, credibility on both sides of the corridor, as it were. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode of What Do You Bring to the Table? I've been your host, Rajiv, and I still am.